Welcome back to Leonid Live Lounge. I'm your host today, Adam, and I'm delighted to be joined by Hinesh Shah. Hinesh is a forensic accountant and a partner at Pinsent Mason, an international law firm headquartered here in London, which ranks amongst the top 100 law firms in the world by turnover and is a top 100 investigations practice by Global Investigations Review. Hinesh is a graduate of the Nottingham University Business School and a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. And in 2024, he featured on City Wealth Leaders list for top 40 under 40 next gen accountants. Hinesh, welcome. Great to have you with us. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Adam.
Where I like to start this show is always asking people that when you go to, say, a networking event and you meet someone new, how do you explain what you do for a living?
That's a great question. I generally say I'm a forensic accountant, at which point people generally ask me, what is that? And then I say it's like being a detective, but following the money as opposed to solving murders and bloody crime scenes. That's generally how I phrase myself.
Excellent. How did you get into forensic accounting? How did your career start?
Crikey, this takes me back about 20 years when I was 17 years old. So I'd done my UCAS applications and I really had my heart set on going to Nottingham University. I'd been there a couple of times, fallen in love with the place, and really wanted to go and study there. And then I was always a smart student, as a lot of typical boys are. I didn't probably study as hard as I should have. And I didn't get the grades I needed to get into Nottingham University. And I remember just being on my bed, absolutely distraught, thinking, what am I going to do with life? This has all gone completely wrong. And then I just started thinking about gap year jobs and what could I do for a year whilst I maybe reset an exam or reapply again the following year. And I came across PwC and they were doing a gap year scheme, of which one of the departments was forensic services. And I thought, oh, that sounds a bit interesting. Let me apply for that. And so I filled out the application form and applied. And next thing you know, I've got an interview. And this is me at 17 years old and got an interview in the city. All very nerve-wracking, but I went to the interview, presented myself as best as I could. Didn't know much about the professional services world or the wider financial services world, if I'm honest, at that point in time. But they liked me enough to call me back for an assessment day, at which point I got through that too. And then from that perspective, it was really a no-brainer to do a gap year with them back when I was 18. So after I finished my A levels, and doing that gap year in the forensics team, resitting couple of exams for one of my levels to get me the grades that I needed to then get into Nottingham University has really sort of shaped where I've ended up today, if I'm honest. I mean, my first foray into the forensics world was back when I was 18, and that's now what I'm doing 20 odd years later. So that's how it all started.
Brilliant that you got that second opportunity, and to do it through landing on your feet in a way in PwC and getting that early exposure to forensics. So you managed to go back to school. You went to Nottingham, like you say, you graduated there. And then was it an easy choice to immediately return to PwC after that and continue a career in forensic accounting?
Yeah, it was, if I'm honest, partly because I was quite lucky that after my gap year, I was sponsored by PwC to do my degree. So they would pay for my tuition fees, and then I would come back in the summers and work for 4 to 6 weeks. And by the end of my second year at university, I had a guaranteed job lined up with the PwC, which was quite a nice position to be in. I had lots of friends doing the sort of applications in their final year at university whilst also trying to study at the same time. And that's how my sort of journey began. And the other quite noticeable point, which only became apparent to me after I started working there, is I joined PwC the same day that Lehman's went bust. And a lot of my friends at university who had gone through sort of the investment banking route and gone for sort of jobs in that respect, their jobs almost disappeared before they had even started them. So I was quite fortunate in a way that I had picked, and just right time, right place, picked to stay with PwC rather than going down a banking route. Yes, very, very grateful for that.
When I look at your time at PwC, I think you managed to take hold of a lot of advantages that the kind of thing that Big Four probably really talk to graduates about. You had a couple of secondments, didn't you? One into one of the regulators in the UK, and also maybe one of the more enviable ones, an international secondment where you went and joined the firm's one of the Middle Eastern offices. FCA secondment was first, if I remember rightly from your background. Would you tell us a little bit about how that came about and what that experience was like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm quite lucky to have worked on quite a lot of different projects and in different places during my time at PwC. And I think where it all stemmed is when you do the grad scheme at PwC, you do half forensics, half audit, and then after 3 years, once you're sort of a qualified accountant, you've got to pick which way you want to lean. And for me, forensics is what I had signed up to at PwC when I was 18. It's what I'd done in my summers at university. It's always where I sort of had my passion and my interest lie. So I joined the forensics team full time in sort of 2011. And a lot of the work at the time then was around sort of financial crime investigations. So I'd done a few matters and projects with sort of clients in the financial services sector. All of my audit experience had been in the financial services sector with clients such as Barclays Treasury, American Express. And then it just happened that the Financial Conduct Authority, they regularly looked for secondees, both from law firms and accountancy firms, to help them on their investigations. That's the sort of the skill set they need. And one of the partners in the financial crime team said, "Would you be interested?" And I thought, this sounds pretty cool, sounds a bit different. You get to work on a single investigation, but with the regulatory powers that come with it, as opposed to just working in a professional services context. And so that all progressed. And then before you knew it, I was working at the FCA in the enforcement division on what I refer to as the London Whale investigation. It's now obviously in the public domain, so I can talk about it. But it was an investigation involving JP Morgan, where one of the traders or one of the trading offices had lost JP Morgan 6.2 billion in trading losses. And part of my role within that sort of enforcement team was to sort of decipher what had happened, was it intentional, what communications were being made to the market. And it involved quite a few firsts for me. So it involved the first time I'd seen Bloomberg chat messages, my first real foray into reviewing and deciphering Bloomberg chat messages, and quite complex trading strategies. But I also got to sit in on a couple of interviews that the FCA had with some of the subjects. And that was quite a powerful moment, because the powers that they have and the sort of the questions they can ask you to put you on the spot, I could see in some of the interviews I sat on, really made the subjects uncomfortable. And it was almost to the point where you could see beads of sweat coming onto their foreheads when they knew they were sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. So I really, really enjoyed that secondment. I think from my perspective, the investigations they have were great to work on, but I was probably 25, 26 at the time. And I knew I still had a lot more to give at that point. So I wasn't ready to sort of move into that regulatory public sector body type role just yet. I still had a lot more to give in the private sector. So then went back to PwC, carried on working the forensics team. And then it was around 2013, 2014 when I first got approached about doing a secondment in the Middle East. So one of my directors that I'd worked with had gone over to Qatar to sort of help build the forensics team out there. And Dubai did appeal to me because by that point I had gotten married and my wife's a lawyer, and there's certain countries where UK law is practiced and it's not practiced. In Dubai, having the DIFC, the Dubai International Finance Centre, meant we could both work out there together. So that was quite appealing. And eventually it all worked out and we moved over there in February 2015. So I signed up for 2 years of comment. My wife switched jobs, and that was incredible. That was a really, really great experience. Got to work Middle East, so did an investigation in Bahrain, spent some time in Saudi, and went to some of the other countries as well. And I got to do a breadth of investigations. So it wasn't just purely financial crime. It was bribery and corruption. It was compliance reviews. It was AML. It was accounting irregularities. So it was a breadth of stuff that I got to do, and we got to travel and see some fantastic places too, which was lovely.
Anyone that's connected with me on LinkedIn will know I harp on all the time about the experience that you can gain by working abroad. I think it's so fundamental, especially in the modern world where the world seems smaller than ever. Getting that time abroad, it's the soft skills as well that you learn, isn't it? Working with people from all over the world. London obviously is an international city, but getting a chance to go and work on the ground in another country is
Yeah, no,
brilliant.
definitely agree with that. And Dubai is a real hubbub of people, if I'm honest. I mean, it's 80% expats, or was 80% expats when I was there. So in the forensics team that we had, there were a lot of people from Lebanon, Pakistan, India, South Africa, Australia, all over. And just understanding and working with those different cultures, it really does develop skills that you otherwise miss by just being in sort of one place for the majority of your career.
Absolutely. And so you got 2 full years out there, which is great. And then you came back to PwC in the UK. And then you made the move, which really is what I was excited to talk to you about today on the show, in-house to a law firm. I imagine the vast majority of forensic accountants listening will know the brand Pinsent Mason, obviously one of the largest law firms in the world. What was it that made you decide you wanted to explore an opportunity inside a law firm?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll be honest. During my time at PwC, I was never unhappy. The people are great place to build your career, development, the training programs that they offer. All of that was exceptional. Probably what really ignited my interest for something different was my time in the Middle East. It was being part of that smaller forensics team. I mean, it was still a big team, but it was about 80 people in the Middle East. But it was being able to work on a breadth of investigations and other projects that meant you could be what I refer to as a generalist all over again, so do a bit of everything. And when I came back to the forensics team in London, the work was still really interesting, but to progress to that sort of director partner level, you really did need to find a niche area or a specialism, because that's what the team was so much bigger. What they needed were people who were going to carve out market revenues in sort of specific areas. So my business case would have been, I just spent 18 months doing an investigation with Danske Bank. So my business case was lending itself towards financial crime, Nordic banks, that sort of space. As I said, the time that I had in Dubai was just, I really enjoyed it. And I missed not being able to just pick up a whistleblowing investigation or bribing and corruption investigation in a different sector. And so that was always somewhat at the back of my mind. And then I happened to be on shared parental leave with my first kid, with my son. And I was on LinkedIn and I just saw the role pop up. It just popped up out there. And I thought, this is something different. I've not heard of this before. I knew there were a couple of law firms that had sort of forensic accounting teams out there, but I hadn't seen any of them recruiting, and I hadn't heard of Pinsent Masons before. And so because I was on leave, I just thought, let me go and have a chat and just see what this opportunity looks like. And so I went and spoke, and the team, it was much smaller. It was sort of 6 or 7 people, but it was really doing the work. It was sector agnostic. You could go there and help build the team, help build something from the ground up, and shape the way that was going to turn out. And I think as soon as I realized that it was the breadth of work that I wanted, it didn't matter what PwC said or did. And I still got some very good friends at PwC, but it was just the one thing that I knew they didn't need was someone who just wanted to be a generalist. They needed specialists, and that's why I then decided to make the move to Pinsent Masons. And yeah, that was almost 6.5 years ago.
And a good 6.5 years it's been. A couple of years ago, you made partner there, which is amazing. It's great to see the career track um, in a law firm is quite equal to that, at least on the surface, it would appear to being in an accounting firm. But I wanted to pick your brains a little bit on, as someone now that has been at a big four accounting giant in the shape of PwC, and now with that in-house role at a law firm. For anyone listening that maybe has only ever worked for an accounting firm or a consultancy or advisory firm, what are some of the similarities, but also maybe some of the differences, either in structure, setup, maybe work, that you've experienced since making that switch?
Yeah, I mean, there are both, right? There are both similarities and differences. I mean, one of the things that took my head getting around was, it was only after I left PwC that I realized how big an entity it was. I think at the time when I left, it was sort of somewhere around 400,000 people. And to put that into perspective, when I joined Pinsent Masons, it was about 3,500. So you're talking 100th of the size, right? And it's I'd never really thought of PwC as that way, because you sort of operate in your team, which is obviously part of the UK office, but globally PwC was just so big, which meant the training and development opportunities that they can offer you are that much broader and more developed. I mean, to put that into context, our team at Pinsent Masons, everyone is already a qualified accountant by the time they've joined the team. We don't recruit at the graduate level. Don't offer the ACA training qualifications. So everyone that comes into our team is already an experienced forensic accountant to some degree, which is great, because you need, in a smaller team, you want people who are sort of have got that competence, who are self-starters, who know the forensics world. That is quite important. The similarities are the work is very similar. So when I was at PwC working on investigations, we were always instructed by law firms, especially the big ones where you've got privilege and legal issues, etc. And the same is true now. But the only difference is now the client can get both the legal advice and the forensics analysis and the forensics advice from one place. And so it means we work hand in hand, literally alongside our legal colleagues. Whereas at PwC, yes, you are working with the lawyers, but there's always that, you're always distinct entities. So when I think about it on reflection from a client's perspective, they've got two sets of contracting terms, they've got two sets of advisors, both have got their own objectives and obviously financial aims as well. Whereas, if I'm honest, what I like about Pinsent Masons is we are one unit providing all of the advice to a client with one objective of getting the right outcome for them. And that's quite nice, being able to be involved from the start to the finish, and to see how our analysis dovetails with the legal strategy and considerations, which sometimes, if I'm honest, at PwC I wasn't always privy to or didn't have sight of. I really enjoy being involved in those discussions as well. I mean, in terms of the caliber of people, they're both exceptional places to work, high performers, very high achieving teams. And they're both partnership models. So the progression routes ultimately are very similar, albeit at PwC you've got more layers in the hierarchical structure. But yeah, those are a few of the headline sort of similarities and differences.
That's great, thank you. To lean on something you started to talk about there, some people, particularly maybe younger forensic accountants that just don't have the market experience yet, may be wondering why would a law firm build their own forensic accounting team? What would say the reason or the advantage be behind that? Could you share any insight as to how you see the benefit to Pinsent being of you and your team being established within the business?
Yeah, I mean, it's no different to now the professional service firm establishing their own legal arms, right? I mean, and Pinsent Masons has had a forensic accounting team for a very long time. You're talking since the early 2000s in some way, shape, or form. And if you think about particularly, I mean, forensics is honed in disputes and litigation matters, right? That's where sort of the forensic practice have evolved out of. On any dispute and litigation, there's always quantum elements of calculation of damages, loss of profits, interest calculations. All of that does require some degree of forensic analysis and forensic calculations. So for me, it's an obvious synergy between the two practices, between legal and forensics, that they've always worked closely together. And Pinsent was I think, probably quite brave. That was one of the first few law firms to sort of develop that sort of in-house expertise. I am surprised more law firms don't offer it, if I'm honest. I think that time will come. The market for sort of forensic contractors is less than it is in the legal contracting world, but I think that will develop over time. I do see more law firms now shaping and moving into that sort of branching out into the professional services consultancy type offerings that they can do, just like Pinsent Masons is. I think other firms are seeing that as ancillary or additional revenue lines that they can start generating. But you can't build that culture overnight. You can't build those relationships overnight. So I think one of the benefits that I've now seen of now having been with a firm for sort of 6.5 years is where I've worked with legal teams, and it's not just our sort of our global investigations team, which is where a lot of my work comes from. It's our civil fraud team, our contentious tax team, where you've worked with people and they really see the benefit of having our in-house forensic analysis capabilities. The work, every time they're instructed on a matter, they are thinking, can we play these guys in? Can we bring them in onto work? And rather than having to go externally, we can do everything for the client. We can start working on the same day under the same engagement letter. It is a very, very nice place to be if you're a client and you need both sets of skills.
And that's a really great summary on that. And you mentioned them being quite brave, being one of the earlier firms to do it. No surprise, really, that Pinsent's won numerous awards through the years for being sort of innovators in the legal industry. And like you say, it's just one example of that, really,
Yeah.
in the fact that they built a forensic accounting team so long ago. Anyone listening, maybe that's considering making this switch into a law firm at some point in their career, is there any advice or guidance you would offer? Is there anything maybe they could, if someone sat with, I don't know, 5 to 10 years of experience in a forensic team at a Big Four or similar, is there any upskilling they could start thinking about doing today to get ready for that? Is there any particular type of casework they should try and get experience in? What could someone do to best prepare for a later move into a law firm?
Yeah, I think it's another good question, and I think one of the benefits that I would now, with hindsight, have done in my younger years is if you're starting out and forensic accountancy is sort of where you want to follow, at least to start with in your career, is do try a bit of everything, try a bit of disputes, try a bit of investigations, try a bit of compliance reviews. And I think my background when I was at PwC predominantly just it lended itself to investigations. That's where there was a lot of work when I started my career. It's sort of where I enjoyed it the most, and I just sort of there was always a pipeline of work that I could fall into. But it did mean that I'd never worked on a sort of a smaller dispute from end to end. And if I'm honest, that's probably it's not a regret, but it's probably one thing that I do wish that I did have more experience in, because following on from doing investigations, a lot of my work then fell into the sort of the financial crime investigation market, which is bribery and corruption, anti-money laundering. But now, having come into Pinsent Masons, where again our team is smaller, I get involved in a complete complete breadth of forensic accounting. So I will get asked very technical accounting issues on topics such as distributor reserves or leases or revenue recognition issues, which I quite enjoy now, but it's something that I had to brush off some of the textbooks and just bring up those technical accounting that I hadn't had to use for quite a long time. And I think that's one thing I would say to anyone starting out. Okay, do try a bit of everything, because until you try something, you don't know what it's going to be like. I think everyone assumes investigations are glamorous, and yes, they are. I really enjoy them. They are really fun. They are also very intense and very quite sensitive at times and quite pressurized environments. And what I've enjoyed of being at Pinsent Masons is I've also got to work on a few big litigation matters. And again, seeing the end-to-end spectrum of how a litigation unfolds rather than just being involved in that expert report section has been great. I've been able to go to court over the last 12 months and see defendants being cross-examined, see how our expert reports are used to put forward evidence against the other parties. So my advice would be get that breadth of experience. I mean, some of the accountancy firms, especially big ones, are great to start your career from a training and development perspective. They are geared up for that. But at a point in time when you realize this is what I want to do, or this is where I want to end up, or I don't want to specialize so quickly, that's when smaller practices and there are more and more out there now. There are more and more outfits who are developing in-house forensics team or smaller investigation teams. And I think that's when it's time to sort of consider whether there's something out there that might be different and more fitting for what you want.
I think that's really great advice. And I think that lines up with how we're seeing the market evolve at the moment. I think more and more forensic firms, almost following on from the experience you were having at the end of your time at PwC, are doubling down on a niche within a niche within a niche. You know, you've got firms that are trying to become the go-to for intellectual property disputes, or you've got firms that are trying to be the go-to for cryptocurrency investigations. And like you say, great if you have a real passion for that type of work, you go and work for that firm, you'll be doing it, you know, every day of the week. Brilliant. But maybe future you will regret a little bit not getting that more diversified experience. So I think it's a really good thing to note that if you are at a firm where maybe you're only getting exposure to one type of forensics work, have a think about how can you get a more varied amount of experience on your CV, benefit your future career.
Yeah, and just I guess one point to add on that point, Adam, is I think when I started my career at PwC, it was probably my intake or thereabouts where people still joined one of the professional services firm and said, I want to be a partner here for the rest of my life. I want to progress to partner and then become a partner and stay there. And what I'm seeing more and more now is that people are less wedded to that particular route, but more interested in getting sort of cycles of experience, as I call it. So they might say, you know what, I want to get my accountancy qualification, then I want to go in-house to a big corporate for a little bit and see what that environment looks like. Then I might want to go to a regulator, and then I might want to go to a law firm and try that. It's only by trying these different things that you then realize where you develop different skills in each of those environments and different experiences, which are quite invaluable. I always say to my colleagues, I wish I had worked in-house at a corporate, because that's probably the one thing that I don't have on my CV, seeing how that in-house role would have developed. But I think they all bring sort of unique perspectives. And in this day and age, any form of different experience, diversity, new insights, new perspectives is really valuable. So I think don't be too quick to say no to things. The other thing that always resonates is something that my dad always said, which is always like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there and ask for something. If you're enjoying your time somewhere but you feel like you're not developing, ask, can I try something different? Can I do 3 months in this particular team? Can I just see what that might look like? Because I think it will help me develop these other skills. I think you've got to be brave and put yourself out there for those opportunities, and only by doing that and then grabbing them with two hands when they come are you going to make the most of your career. If I'm honest, it is brave. Anytime you do a different role or you move out of your comfort zone, it is really brave. When I left PwC, I was incredibly nervous because it had been the only place I'd worked since I was 18 years old. Yes, I did 2 years in Dubai, but that was still PwC. So leaving that PwC ecosystem to come and work at Pinsent Masons, I was quite nervous to say, well, actually, how am I going to fit in here? I was surrounded by really smart people at PwC. What's it going to be like over there? But it's a leap you take, and you jump in with 2 feet, right? And you know that, look, if it doesn't work out after X amount of time, you will then look for the next role, etc. But luckily for me, it has worked out, and I'm really enjoying my time here.
And that's absolutely brilliant advice. And I think someone that's worked with accountants, particularly forensic accountants, for 10 years, naturally in your job, you've got to be risk averse. But I think you're so true that that adversity to risk can sometimes fall over into sort of protecting one's own career. The way I've always viewed it, I think along those lines is worst case scenario, you go and try something, and after 6 months, if it doesn't work, well, first of all, if you leave your previous employer in a good way, you're more than likely always going to have a home to go back to. Or like you say, if you leave and they replace that position or it doesn't exist anymore and you can't go back, a good forensic accountant will always be in need. There will always be a job to go to. So I think that's so true. It also sort of dovetails back to the point you made earlier about that experience you got in Dubai and also with the FCA, trying different things and putting your hand up and being brave enough in a firm to go, can I go and work abroad for a couple of years? And, they may say no, but also they may say yes, and you may end up getting a fantastic experience out of it. So I think that's so, so true.
Yeah, no, and the other point for me is I say this to my wife all the time. We both she was working in the private sector. She now works for the government. But you really have to work somewhere where you're happy, because the sort of work that a forensic accountant does, a lot of the time it can be quite intense, very very critical, sensitive sort of environments and projects that you work on, and deadlines. Right, you've got really tight deadlines where things have got to be turned around. It can involve at times working quite late, and you spend so much time at work with your colleagues, with your teams. If you're not happy doing that on a sort of 80% of the year, you're not really going to be that happy when you come back home and it's late and you've then got to spend 2 hours with the family, and you're working on the weekend. You've got to really enjoy what you do and be happy where you are. And as long as, my rule of thumb is, as long as that is happening 80% of the time, and in the 20% of time where you might not be super happy, but you are developing or you're learning about yourself, you are putting yourself in those stretch situations, that for me is a pretty good place to be. So yeah, so developing and being happy and enjoying what you do are fundamental to I guess happy life and happy work-life balance.
I think that's incredibly true. Yeah, great takeaway. Now that you're in a position where, as a partner in a firm, when it comes to hiring, you will be one of the decision makers. For anyone maybe starting out a bit younger in their career or in that sort of messy middle part where they're trying to define what they're going to do, when it comes to applying for roles and interviewing, is there anything you as a hiring manager now look for in a candidate, whether it's a particular skill on a CV or indeed maybe soft skills that people can develop? Any advice you would offer to people that are in that sort of earlier stage building their career around what they can do?
So I think for me, a lot of when I'm interviewing people comes down to how they present themselves. Are they energetic? Do they come across as enthusiastic? Do they want the role? I mean, it sounds like basics 101, right? But I have seen a lot of interviews where people have come to them and that those energy levels are not a 10. If I'm interviewing someone, I want a 10 plus, I want an 11 or a 12. I want to see someone who's really keen, really eager, who's asking me questions about my role. Why did I get into forensics? What are you working on at the moment? What do you think the team might look like in 5 years' time? I want someone who's there, excited to be part of something that is growing and have a genuine interest in it. I mean, if I'm honest, sometimes if someone's come from the big four, and like, bearing in mind we only generally recruit experienced forensic accountants, I almost take the technical side as a given. What I will look for is, have they got a breadth of work that they can turn their hand to? Because being part of a small team, we get inquiries from different legal teams left, right, and centre. So actually having people who are able to turn their hands to an accounting query versus a data analytics piece of work, etc., that is quite important. So what really shines through on a CV for me is someone who has taken opportunities, shown that they've got a breadth of experience, but also is willing to try new things and put themselves out of their comfort zones. Um, and I mean that might be working. That might be part of that is about work doing a secondment somewhere else in a different environment. But part of that is saying I took the opportunity to go and spend 2 months doing this, or I spent 1 month doing a online coding course. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it just shows that that person's got that self-starting attitude that I want anyone in my team to have.
Completely agree. The bit you started with there as well around, are they showing up clearly wanting the job, bringing some energy? It breaks my heart as a recruiter the amount of times you call a client to get feedback on an interview, and the worst feedback I ever think I get is the candidate can do the job, they're technically able, but we got no feeling that they actually wanted to
Yeah.
work with us or to work here. I was thinking, if you don't know something technically and you're not able to do it, that's just the way it is. But like you say, not researching a company, researching a role, all these things, it's so vital. So, yeah, great insight, and I back you 100% on that. It's
Yeah, and
unfortunately more common than you think.
it isn't. And when I come out of an interview, I always ask myself, would I want to go for a coffee or a drink with that person in my own time? Right, that is the exam question I'll ask myself, because if that person joins my team, I'm spending what, 35 plus hours minimum a week with that person, generally, whether it's on Teams or whether it's in persons. And I want high energy levels. I want people in my team to be operating at high energy levels, because that helps. As part of our team, we are a small team within the wider Pinsent Masons ecosystem. We need people who are going to go and make things happen, and you don't get that by being low energy. You just don't. So high energy growth mindsets, people who are going to put themselves out there and make a difference. And that all comes out. And when you're hiring someone, you go off, yes, what's on their CV, but probably two, maximum three interactions, physical interactions with that person. If you're not getting the right vibe after the first interview, the chances are they're probably not going to get a second one, if I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely agree. 100%. Great advice. Hinesh, this has been really great. I want to finish on one. I have sort of a closing question I use every time on the show, which is to ask you if there's a particular trend or area within forensics that you think over the next couple of years could be either a growth area or something to watch. Is there anything you and the team at Pinsent are keeping an eye on that you think could be big within the industry in the next couple of years?
That's a great question. There's still a lot of basic fraud and litigation disputes matters that I think are still going to continue. I mean, a few areas where I've seen sort of more inquiries coming through is definitely on the cryptocurrency side. I think everyone thought cryptocurrency was either a bit of a bubble and was going to disappear, but it clearly hasn't. I mean, Bitcoin is still at a very high price. You're seeing more and more articles in the press about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency being seized. So I think that it is an area that is going to grow. I think the use of AI is quite key. So we are looking at how we might be able to use not just artificial intelligence, but any form of technology to make what we do more efficient, whether that's helping you with data analytics or whether that's being able to do a first cut of reviewing a company set of accounts. I mean, anything that a computer can do that will save time, from my perspective, is great from a client perspective, but also from a team perspective, it means they can really spend the time on the value add stuff. I think probably more so from my perspective is new markets. So for example, we've now got an office in Saudi Arabia. So I reckon hopefully we'll start seeing some more work generating from the Middle East, which will be quite interesting given my prior experience over there. So yeah, there's quite a lot of it. I mean, I think if I'm honest, in the forensics world, it's quite an exciting place to be at any point in time. But then now, as a partner, it's quite nice in the way that I can start thinking about, okay, what's new? What's new revenue streams that we might want to develop and bring in? I mean, obviously within the constraints that we are not the size of an Accenture or a McKinsey, etc. But I think it's quite exciting to know that look, if I think there's opportunities in a particular sector, I can go and explore what that looks like. Right. So, and the other area that I am focusing on that I do see where there's going to be potential growth is I think is just around fraud. There's a new failure to prevent fraud offence that's come into the UK, but also auditors are asking more questions. They're being more skeptical about internal investigations that our clients have done, and we are seeing clients having to respond to those sort of inquiries. So we are helping, and we're quite well placed because obviously we can do a lot of our work under privilege. We are able to help our clients provide both, again, the legal advice, but then also help them respond to their auditors' inquiries and get them comfortable that the investigation has been robustly conducted, or if it hasn't, what steps can we take to get the auditors comfortable? So that's a growing trend that I think we're going to see over the coming years.
Brilliant. Ines, it's been great to chat. I'm going to pop your LinkedIn profile in the show notes if anyone listening wants to connect and pick your brains or maybe work for you in the future. It's been fascinating to hear from you today. Thank you for taking some time out, and I look forward to speaking again soon. Guys, thank you for joining us. We'll be back again soon with another episode. Take care.